Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I've got another kind of interesting video to tackle today. This is something I've been thinking about making for a while, so I hope that it's insightful to a degree. But I wanted to talk today about secondary knives. You might notice that all of the knives here on the table in front of me are knives that are on the smaller end of the scale. Obviously there's still a variety in sizes here, but most of them are either quite small or quite light or both. And for me, that's what I look for in a secondary knife. Usually, the second knife that's on my person is smaller and lighter than the primary knife. So I carry secondary knives in a variety of ways, in a variety of places on my person, and for a variety of reasons. But I wanted to tackle some of that reasoning and just kind of show off what I like to put in that role. Some of these I've had for a very long time. Some of them are fairly new to me. Some get carried super frequently. Some get carried on rarer occasions. Two knives on the table actually aren't even mine. This Fox Suru was mine. I got this knife a long time ago. I don't remember exactly how long ago, but I traded it to my brother. I don't even remember what for. I want to say it might have been, it was probably a Kaiser Feist, if I remember correctly. And he had this knife for a long time, hasn't really carried it much since just because he has a lot of other things. And so he asked me to sell it for him. So it's in my possession because I'm going to be selling it. But this is a excellent illustration of a secondary knife. The other knife that's not mine is this Carry Gordo, which belongs to my friend Jason, who has lent me this knife along with two others to check out and review. Jason, you may know from the Millie PM2 Para 3 Club on Facebook and Instagram, and under the same name here on YouTube. He makes some great videos as well, so check him out. But this knife belongs to him. The Fox Suru belongs technically to my brother, although it is for sale. So that's going up very soon. If you want it, hit me up, I guess. Anyway, the rest of these knives are mine. Some of them I've had for a matter of like 2 days, these two. Some of them I've had for a couple of weeks, and others I've had for a long time, a year plus. So let's talk about how I pick a secondary, but first let's talk about why I carry a secondary knife, because I think that's important for me to discuss. Some people live under the philosophy of one is none and two is one. Like, you got to be over prepared, and I think there's definitely some value in that. Sometimes I like to throw out phrases like that just because I'm half making fun of them and half agree with them. So there's certainly an element to that. It's nice to have an extra knife on you in the rare occasion that I would happen to have my primary knife fail me mechanically somehow. It's broken, it's out of commission. It's great to have another knife. Have I ever had that happen? No. Do I think it ever will? No. But if that's the case, great. I've got a second knife on me. But the real most, the most sincere reason why I carry two knives every day is because I love knives. And so for a guy like me who has usually about 20 knives that I really care about in my collection. I've got more like junk drawer knives, but like knives that belong in my case that I'm picking from every morning. There's only 7 days in a week. There's 31 days in a month. So if I don't repeat day after day carrying the same knife over and over, then it'll still take me a couple of weeks to get back to carrying that same knife if I were to go through knife by knife and give each of my knives a fair turn. That's not the way I work. I don't rotate based on how long it's been since I've carried something. I grab what I want to carry that day. But my point is this: if I double the amount of knives in my pockets, then I get to double the frequency at which my knives get carried. So if I've got a primary that goes in my front pocket and primary knives make up about half of my collection, then I also put a secondary knife in another pocket, and then between that it's just 10 and 10-ish. My odds get much better for carrying each thing frequently, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And different knives have different mechanisms. I'm the kind of guy who likes to fidget. So as much as it's about one is none and two is one and all of those cliches that go along with having two knives on you, it's also just about me being a knife guy and wanting to have more experiences with my knives. And so I find that it's comfortable for me to carry to. I find that I like to carry to. And there is an additional reason that I do find actually comes in handy with carrying a secondary knife. Because a primary knife for me, and I'll do a separate video on my primary knives, is something like a Koenig Arius, which is rather large and looks rather large. Or it could be something like Benchmade Super Freak, which again is rather large, might look kind of scary to some people. It could be something like my Spyderco Shaman, again, big, looks overbuilt for most EDC things I would do out and about. Now, with my lifestyle, it's not like I'm frequently around people who would be terrified of me pulling out one of those knives that I just showed you, but from time to time, one of my wife's family members or her friends, if one of my daughter's friends are around, little kids, stuff like that, it sometimes feels inappropriate to pull out a big, kind of scary looking knife to do a really small task. Like if I'm opening a toy for my daughter, or one of her friends or her cousins are around, or whatever it is, it's just more comfortable for me to pull out a smaller knife that's less scary looking, and it's less intimidating to people who aren't deep in the knife hobby like I am. Now, around most people that I associate with, it's no big deal. I can pull out whatever knife, and they know that I'm a knife guy and that I carry knives. But if I'm out in public, I do live in California, in Los Angeles, so there are places and times where it's not as acceptable for me to pull out a scary looking knife. I'm not saying that I agree with that being a thing. That frustrates me. That's the society I live in, but you gotta deal with what you gotta deal with, I guess. So the reasons for carrying secondary knives are A, that I just want to carry two knives, and it's an excuse to do so, and B, that sometimes I do find certain tasks it's more unassuming to pull out a knife like these little guys that are on the table. And I'll also say there are certain tasks as well that come up that are better suited to small knives, where having that smaller blade and maybe even just like a little bit more dexterity or just the control you have over a small knife feels different than trying to tackle a really like fine motor skill type task with a knife with a big 3.5, 4-inch blade. That's sometimes my primary knives can be too much for a certain task, and what I really need is a thin, slicey, precise little instrument. So there you have that. Let's talk a little bit about why these knives are what I carry as secondary knives. Before I jump in, I apologize, I'm still rambling here, but the way that I carry secondary knives I think is also important. Where they go on my body, how I put them into pockets, or where do I put them. Lately, my most common place to carry a secondary knife is in my left back pocket. Now, that might not work for you, it works for me, because I'm pretty ambidextrous. I write and I shoot left-handed, and I eat left-handed, I guess, but for most things I do with knives, I do use my right hand. So I carry my primary front right pocket. That goes with my wallet. My left front pocket is my phone. I don't share anything else with the phone in that pocket. So putting a knife in my back left pocket works really well for me because I can get it with my left hand, I can deploy any of my knives with my left hand, and I can do a lot of things left-handed with a knife if I want to, or I can simply hand it off to my right hand. And with a secondary knife, it's not the kind of thing where if somehow I was getting into some kind of scary altercation where I needed to use my knife as a weapon, I'd be reaching for my primary with my right hand anyways. That's where I'd want my knife. So I wouldn't be like fumbling to my back pocket to then pass to my right hand. I wouldn't be reaching for my secondary in that circumstance. So that works for me. Sometimes the other places where I'll carry a secondary knife, if they're small enough, like the Finch Runtley here, would be in my fifth pocket. On certain pairs of jeans and pants, the fifth pocket that rides just above my front right pocket, or kind of half in, half above that pocket, you know what I'm talking about. Certain knives like this will fit into a pocket like that and are comfortable to have in a pocket like that. And so that totally works for me as well. And then the I would say probably the last realistic place where it's common for me to carry a secondary knife would actually be in my waistband. So kind of like appendix carrying a pistol, just off slightly to the right side, tucked into my waistband, clip behind my belt so the belt rides over the clip, and then it's super discreet. No one can even see it's there. Usually if I'm going to do that, it's going to be something with a deep carry clip that's not too long and that's light and slim, which all of these knives are pretty slim, pretty light, pretty small. Not many of them are very long. So let's talk about why these knives, now that that's out of the way. One of the most common for me to carry as a secondary is my Spyderco Para 3. This is probably, realistically, the biggest knife here on the table. It might not be longer than the, I don't know, maybe it is a hair longer than the Bug Out, but it's also the tallest in this direction, and it's one of the thicker knives on the table, but it's a smaller version of my PM2. It's a platform that I'm super familiar with, super comfortable with, and it just feels right to me in hand. It's just small enough to be a secondary knife for me. This is one of those knives also that sometimes I carry as a primary. There's a couple on this table that can go as a primary for me. If I'm in a lightweight pair of shorts and I want to just carry one lightweight knife because I'm going for a run, or I'm just running some trash out to the dumpster or around the house, like lightweight carry, this is a total doable primary for me. And in those cases where I'm only carrying one lightweight knife, it's going to be the larger of these knives here. But this is one that can go in either role. But for me, usually the way that I carry this at this current state and time is current date and time. I don't know what the right current date and time. Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. Currently, this knife most frequently gets used for me as a secondary. I love carrying the Para 3 as a secondary. This, as you can see, is not Yo Mama's Para 3. This is Maximet with blue denim micarta scales, a full titanium hardware kit from Blades We Love, and of course a deep carry clip. If this knife had the factory clip on it, A, I probably wouldn't carry it at all, but B, I wouldn't carry it as a secondary, because for me, it's very important to have a really good clip and for the knife to carry a certain way. And with the Lynch clip on here, it does carry the way I want. With the factory clip and the way that they put lanyard in preference over clip, I still makes me mad that Spyderco did that. Anyways, it just doesn't work. But in this setup, it totally works for me. This is on the heavier end, on the bigger end, on the thicker end of being a secondary for me, but this is about as big as a secondary gets in my book. Next, this knife, I think I already mentioned, I'm borrowing from Jason from the Millie PM2 Para 3 Club. This knife is the Carry Gordo. This is not mine, so it's going back to Jason soon, but it totally fits the parameters of what I would, if this was my knife, carry as a secondary. And this one's interesting too, because this is pretty high-end as little knives go. I guess there's a whole world of high-end little knives, but I've never really delved that deep into it, unless you'd consider some other knives here high-end. But this is a fantastic, really well-dialed, really nice, crisp, fun, exciting little frame lock that's really nice and well made, that totally fits the size parameters of being a secondary. This knife would be comfortable in a lot of secondary knife carry positions, and it totally works in that avenue. So I think this one's a really cool example of a nicer full titanium, like dressed up, kind of fancier, fancy pants version of a secondary carry knife. Next we have the Fox Suru. Again, I think I mentioned, I apologize, I'm all over the place today, but this is a knife that I'm selling for my brother. It was mine. I bought this knife, traded it to him for something, and then he doesn't really sell knives very often. He usually asks me to help him out with that, so I am selling it on his behalf. But this knife is an awesome secondary knife. We've got a wire clip, which is angled really well. I believe these are aluminum scales, I'm almost positive, and it's actually really lightweight, especially because they've done so much like drilling, material relief here. It's really very lightweight. The ergos, this is kind of what people would describe as a little big knife because we've got this forward choil, so I'm able to get all 4 fingers on here comfortably, but that means a very small cutting edge. So this is a tiny little knife that I think nobody would really be that off-put by if you pulled out in virtually any situation to cut something small. And it's great. It's got multiple deployment methods because we've got the hole, we've got the flipper. It's a very fun little knife. So this is a great secondary option. This one does fit in my 5th pocket and a lot of pants. I've tried it in that application before and it totally works that way. So this one is cool. Oh, that flipper's tough when you're on the lock bar. Anyway, this is a cool little, definitely secondary knife. Next, this is probably my slimmest knife. This is the Trm Neutron. Now, this in many ways is one of my best secondary carry knives. Maybe by the end of this video, I'll pick like my top 3, what I would consider my best secondary knives. This is probably gonna make that cut because it's just so freaking slim. It's really skinny in a great way. So the comfort of having this in pocket, in any pocket, is just kind of off the charts. It's really good, especially with this smooth micarta. This is it's a great handle material for this knife. The ergos, when you're holding onto this knife, it still feels super locked in without having to be like grippy, gritty material texture. It's just a really well thought out, very thin, very slicey, excellent secondary knife. They also make the Atom, which is a slightly larger version of this knife, about a 1/2 inch more blade, a little bit more handle, and everything is just kind of dialed up size-wise. That one also gets a deep carry clip. I wish this one did. But barring the deep carry clip, just about everything on here is about exactly what I want in a secondary knife. We've got 20 CV blade steel. It's ground super thin. It's way slicey, excellent edge on it. It's just a fantastic setup of materials. We've got liners with micarta scales. We've got, although it's not a deep carry clip, a very functional clip. And yeah, it's a great worker secondary knife. Like if I'm carrying 2 knives and I'm coming up on a fine detail task and this is the secondary, it doesn't matter what's my primary, whether it's ground super well, nice and thin and slicey. This is one of my best like cutting implement, EDC cutting task knives. And this is another one that's large enough that if I'm doing a lightweight carry and I just have one knife on me, this will totally go in my pocket as a primary. It's big enough that it doesn't feel too small for just about any task that I could come up with in a typical EDC environment. So great, great option for a secondary. This is the Summit Half Dome. This knife is actually made by Fox, as you can see, M390 blade steel. It's an awesome flat grind. There's a little bit of a flat up here, but it's almost a full flat grind. Really sharp, very nice edge on it. It's a really cool blade shape, you'll see. This is another one of those knives that I think kind of because of its funkiness, definitely because of the blade shape and the material choice too, how kind of dressed up this full titanium version is. This is a knife that's not going to really scare people. Like this knife doesn't look like it's intended to cut flesh and hurt other human beings. This just looks like it's kind of a funky tool knife. And every time that I've had this on me and I've pulled it out in front of people, no one's ever scared about this knife. No one ever comments on how it looks other than, wow, that looks different or that looks cool, but it's not scary in any way. So this one works great for that. This can go in some of my 5th pockets. I do wish it had a deep carry clip. I think the micarta versions of this knife do get a deep carry clip, the ones with the micarta show scale, but this clip is certainly not a deal breaker for me. This knife hasn't frankly made it in pocket all that often lately, but it did for a while, and there's no reason why it doesn't other than I just have newer things that excite me more. But this knife is really cool. This was actually a win and a giveaway from Advanced Knife Bro, so thanks again to Mark over there. If you don't watch Advanced Knife Bro, you should. He's my favorite YouTube channel, I think, in terms of the actual content he creates. It's just great. But yeah, this is really cool. I like Fox knives, and I like the work that they do. I like that this is M390. Being a full titanium version, it's kind of heavy for its size, but it's not heavy. It's just for its size, it feels substantial. This is a tiny little knife, so even if they made this out of brass, it wouldn't be like actually heavy. It's just, again, for its size, relatively heavy. Next we have the Finch Runtley. This knife I've had, I guess it's been 2 months now, maybe even coming up on 3 months, which is weird. This still feels like it's one of my newer knives to me. But I got this knife from River's Edge Cutlery. This is the yellow belly version, which means it's got the yellow G10. This crest is actually glow in the dark, which is kind of cool. I'm not usually a glow materials kind of guy, but it doesn't bother me here because it doesn't look like a weird greenish hue unless you're actually in the dark with it. Anyway, really well thought out secondary small knife. This, it's a weird kind of traditional looking shape for the handle, but then you get this really kind of out there blade shape that looks like modern. It's N690 blade steel, which on a knife this size and for this purpose, I think is fine. We've got a nail nick on both sides, which adds to that kind of traditional vibe, but then you also get a flipper. Just a really different offering in such a fun way. And the guys over at Finch are really cool. I've talked to them on Instagram a little bit. They've actually got a new model, the Tycoona, which I'm stoked to try. I'm sure it will. It's right around the corner for me. There's no way I won't get one of those. With how much I've enjoyed this knife, I have to, yeah, if their first model is this good, I got to get the second one, and it looks great too. But yeah, this is a knife that I should show off more because it makes it in pocket a lot. This is, if you look at it on the table, it's probably the smallest knife here. Even with that blade kind of sticking out the way it does, I think this is the smallest knife that I own, but it goes in hand really well. It's comfortable to hold and use. I did kind of a use test with this one. I did a video, it's back there if you look, and this knife kind of shocked me. I even like feather sticked a little bit of wood, I think. I cut through rope. I've cut through a bunch of paper and cardboard with this at this point, tape on packages, and this thing just keeps on eating everything up. I've stropped it once. It's holding its edge great. Just a really, this is one of the better secondary knives that exists. Like pound for pound, inch for inch, this knife fits in hand great, and it works really great for secondary knife type tasks. So big round of applause for the Finch Runtley. That's one of my favorites for sure. Next, this is the Bug Out. Now, again, this is one of those knives that's pushing the envelope on size. So this is one that could be a primary for me, and it has been countless times. In the time that I've owned this knife, it is one of the most carried knives in my collection, period. It's just so lightweight. The ergos work great for me. You'll see it's missing its clip because I stole it to put on this one while I'm waiting for more of those clips to come from Benchmade. Anyways, it doesn't normally have this clip. It just this morning got swapped because I needed to try a deep carry clip on that one. Anyway, this knife, the profile, the way it carries, the way the deep carry clip fits on it, the way it goes in pocket, the way it comes in and out of pocket, the weight, the dimensions, this is like the ultimate lightweight knife. It's just so thin, so light. It's sub 2 ounces. And for this amount of blade stock or blade length, I think it's like 3.15 or 3.25. I could be wrong. Don't quote me. But it's over 3 inches of blade. To come in under 2 ounces and to fit this well in my hand and to be this usable, I beat on and use this knife. It's just, it's fantastic. So this is one of those knives that is totally at home if I'm going ultra lightweight, going to the beach, going on a run, stuff like that. This is usually a top tier choice for me in a situation like that. But it's also fantastic in the waistband. It's fantastic in my back pocket. This isn't going to fit in my fifth pocket, but it goes as a secondary a lot because it's super capable as a secondary. It's capable enough to be a primary, which means if I can comfortably carry it as a secondary, which with how slim and light it is, I totally can, then it's going to be more than capable for anything a secondary knife should do. All right, let's move on. This is one of my newest. It's only tied in newness with the Salt next to it, but this is the new Benchmade Mini Freak. Now you'll see the Mini Freak, this is the -1 variant of it. I think it's 565, right? Yeah, 565-1. So the regular Mini Freak is the weird like rubbery not my favorite handle material, and S30V blade steel. This one is full carbon scales with S90V blade steel. You'll see this first production. This knife just came out. I literally just opened this like 2 nights ago, I think. So I have had this in pocket nonstop as a secondary since it arrived, because I'm in the process of really trying to feel it out. I'm getting ready to do a review on this in a few days, and I want to find out as much as I possibly can about it. I carried it the first day with the clip that it came with, that wiener clip, or whatever else you want to call it, the split arrow, I think they call it. I don't like that clip. I love Benchmade's mini deep carry clip, what goes on the bug out and the bailout. This is the right clip from Benchmade. So I've got a couple coming from Benchmade. In the meantime, I stole this one, and I kind of actually like this gray one. I've got a black one coming for it, but the gray works well, so maybe I'll put a black one on here. We'll see. Anyway, this knife is really lightweight, being full carbon. It's like, it just feels so good in its weight, and it feels really solid. Carbon has this great sensation to me of feeling really light and almost like hollow, and it doesn't feel like a natural material. It definitely feels synthetic, but it never feels cheap to me. When it's real carbon, the texture on it, the feeling on it, I don't know, I just dig carbon when it's done well. So this knife feels dressed up in a really cool way, but it also makes it ultra functional that it's carbon fiber, because carbon is designed to have super high strength while being super lightweight. So as a knife handle material, it knocks it out of the park. The ergos on it are great. This knife is a little thick. It's thicker than I was frankly imagining it being before having it, but the way it fills my hand feels great, so I don't hold that against it at all, and it carries really, really well. Is it bug out thin? No, but it's also shorter than a bug out, and it doesn't feel much heavier than a bug out, and so it's a really, really great secondary knife. The next one is this one that's new to me. I've still got a little water on here from the photo shoot I did with it today. It got a little wet, but this is the Spyderco Salt 2 in H1 steel. This one, it just fit the size and weight parameters. I don't have enough experience with this knife yet to really, I've only carried it really once, I guess, was today to take it out and take some pictures of it, but I had it in my back pocket and it fit great. It felt great there. It's really lightweight, being these FRN scales. It seems totally functional to me. So again, I don't have enough experiences with this knife yet to really elaborate on it much further than that, but I think it's going to be a great secondary. And this is one of those that, as you can see, again, it's large enough and should be capable enough with a back lock and its construction that I could carry this as a primary. And in certain circumstances, the real reason why I actually pulled the trigger on this knife and wanted to get one, because if you know me, you know I'm not big on back locks, not usually big on plasticky handle materials, stuff like that. But this knife as a deliberate tool for when I'm going places where I can foreseeably imagine myself getting wet, like if I'm going fishing, or this summer I plan on doing a fair bit of kayaking, stuff like that, this is a great knife to put in my pocket. I could also, in a wet environment, carry the Waypoint, but the Waypoint is a $300 kind of dressed up knife. There are some places where, even though it's going to be ultra capable, do I want to take that out on a kayak with me and be super nervous the whole time it's going to fall in the water and I'm never going to see it again? That's a gamble. This knife, I think, was about $85, if I'm not wrong. Might have even been less than that. I don't know. It was sub $100 for sure, and it's great. For being a waterproof, more or less, knife that I don't have to worry about corrosion on, and I could put in a tackle box or in my pocket and jump in the water and literally not worry about it, this is great. So this is going to be a very specific purpose knife for me, but it could also, every now and then, make it in my pocket as a secondary and be great for it, because I love Wharncliffe blades. I like that nice straight edge for those specific precision, fine cutting tasks that sometimes I ask my secondary knives to do. This blade would be great for it, so it could totally work as a secondary. It fits the mold. Next we have the Waypoint, which, as I just talked about, this one got a little wet today too. I took some pictures of this one. It's got some water spots on it, but guess what? they're not corrosion. It's literally just hard water. I cannot get this thing to corrode, which is amazing to me. This knife is my most similar knife to the Bug Out, believe it or not, in terms of thickness, profile, size, the way it carries other than weight. It feels the most like the Bug Out. You'll see it's actually even slightly smaller than the Bug Out in profile. And I think it may be, I don't know, if it's either thinner or the same thickness. It's definitely not thicker than a Bug Out. And we've got a great deep carry wire clip on it, which I adore. I love well done wire clips, and this one knocks it out of the park. We've got thumb stud deployment, liner lock made of LC200N. If you haven't watched any of my videos on this, you should. This is one of my favorite knives that I've ever owned. It's one of my favorite knives that I currently own. It's so good for so many reasons. But it's also, this is a knife that is probably, I don't know, I guess there's a few on this table that I keep saying this about, but it's one of the best at being either a primary or a secondary, because this is plenty of blade for me in most EDC situations to be a primary. Like, I can't really think of a cutting task where this amount of blade, that amount of edge, this handle, these ergos, where it wouldn't be enough for what I'm looking to get out of my knife. So this knife goes as a primary in my pocket often. In fact, when I went to go take pictures of this knife today and it was in my back pocket, this was the one in my front pocket. It's totally fine in that situation. It's plenty sturdy. It's super well built, but it's so small and slim and excellent at carry that I can tuck it anywhere. Not in my fifth pocket, but in my back pocket or my waistband, and it'll make a fantastic secondary, and it does pretty often lately. So this knife I actually lent to my buddy Jason, who lent me this knife, and then had him send it to our friend Thomas and let both of them check it out, and it just came back to me. And so ever since it got back to me, I've had it in pocket a ton because I missed it a lot. It's just one of my favorite knives. So the Waypoint is excellent. Now, the last one on the table is one that kind of surprised me. If you haven't watched my videos on the fluted carbon fiber S90V Native 5, I went into getting this knife just attempting to see if I was wrong about backlocks, because I haven't liked backlocks for a long time. I owned a few of them as a kid, and I felt like I graduated beyond the lock type. I don't necessarily see the merit in it because I don't have other lock types fail on me. Never have. I just don't like the way that these work. It's not my favorite way to use a knife. That being said, this one is a very, very good one. But if you watch my analysis of the knife at the end of the experiment of seeing if I would like it and make do with it, everything about this knife is so good that I completely forgive it having a backlock. I would still prefer this knife if it was a compression lock or a frame lock or even a liner lock. I would like that better. But this knife it's so well done, just incredibly well done. This fluted carbon fiber is excellent. The backlock adds weight. It's a big strip of steel and components, and it makes the knife heavier. But even with all that going on, because it's linerless with this amazing carbon fiber and a nice thin blade stock, this thing is still really lightweight. I've got a Lynch deep carry clip on it. This is a Para 3 clip. I thought I was going to go with one of the MXG clips that I've seen a lot of other people run, but I've been liking this one so much that I have no real reason to switch it up. This is just working great for me. This knife lately, it's shocked me how much I've wanted to carry it. I was making myself put it in pocket the first couple of days, and then once I kind of got used to it a little bit, oh man, I still wish I could fidget with it. That would be great. I still can't Spidey flick it, but carrying it as a secondary, that's fine, because I just carry a fidgety primary. If I carry this with my Koenig Arius, then I fidget with this all day long, and then if I've got a fine, slicey little cutting task to get through, I pull this sucker right out. And it's not that this is like a total bore and a chore to play with. It's fine, but it's not what I would consider fidgeting with a knife. It's not how I like to fidget, to play with a knife this way. So there you have that. But you'll see on here, There's a variety of steels, a variety of shapes, variety of sizes, variety of lock types, variety of deployment methods. I know I say holes are better than studs, but you see plenty of thumb studs on here. There's plenty of flippers. There's a lot happening here. But again, what makes a good secondary knife to me is a combination of a couple of things. It's got to at least check a couple of boxes of being small, being thin, being light, and just being comfortable to carry, I guess. Like, if it's got at least two of those things, then it can work as a secondary for me. But it's got to be on the smaller end of the scale. It's got to be on the lighter end of the scale, which being small helps that. Usually has to be pretty thin and slim, and it's just got to be comfortable, because the spot where I put my primary knife is the spot where it's inherently comfortable to put a knife. That's kind of where knives are designed to go, is in your front pocket, where you reach right down and grab them. The front pocket on men's pants is usually bigger than the back pocket. It's got the right shape and dimension to have a knife sitting there. But once you start putting knives in your back pocket, or especially in your waistband, they better be real comfortable real quick. So I guess that's kind of my philosophy on these. So let's pick a couple that are my favorites. It's going to be really hard to do a top three, like really hard, because oof, that is tough. I'm going to kind of cheat, and I'm going to pull the Para 3 out of it, because I carry that as a primary sometimes. In fact, I'm going to do that as well for the Waypoint. These two would be in my top three, but I feel like they're blurring the line so much that I shouldn't put them there, because they're a little on the bigger end, and they do make it in that front right pocket so often that it's hard to just call them like one of my favorite secondaries. They're just some of my favorite knives. So favorite secondaries in no particular order are going to be the Runtley, because it's just so tiny and fun and different, and also super usable at the same time. So that's going to be there. I'm going to kick the Bug out as well, for the same reason that I carry it as a primary a lot too. Let's say the Trm Neutron, because of how slim it is and what a good slicer it is. It's just fantastic at slicing. Really, really good at slicing, and it carries so slim. Now, this is funny. The hard thing here is it's between the new mini Bug out, which I just got, S90V carbon fiber, and the S90V carbon fiber native 5. The Bug out, or sorry, the Mini Freak, did I call it a Bug out? The new Mini Freak, apologies, is more fun to fidget with, hands down. The Axis lock is a lot more fun to play with than the back lock. But, oh man, they honestly weigh about the same. I couldn't tell you, having them here in my hands, which one's heavier. I think maybe the Para 3 or the Native 5 is slightly heavier. If so, it's not by much. They both have really well done carbon fiber. This one does have the texturing though. Holes are greater than studs, but Axis locks are greater than back locks for fidgeting. Oh, that's tough. I really don't know. Goodness. Just to be that guy, just because I'm kind of a Spyderco fanboy, I'm going to give it to the Native 5. I think it's also a little bit slimmer too. When I really think about how they sit in pocket, both of them needed a new pocket clip. I switched both of them. But the way they ride in pocket, I think the Native 5 is just a little bit slimmer, which makes a difference on a secondary. And so when I've got it in my back left pocket, which is where I carry either of these knives, I think it's just that much more comfortable. So again, no particular order. My top three are going to be the Runtley, the Neutron, and the Native 5, specifically S90V carbon fiber. This is going to sound mean. I have no interest in any other Native 5s at this point. I guess maybe I might want to try like a lightweight version of one at some point. But again, I'm not big on plasticky handle materials, and this knife is plenty light. Like, the only reason why this knife is so good is because it's this configuration. This hasn't converted me to the Native 5. It's converted me to this Native 5. All right, enough rambling. Those three are going to be my favorites, barring that I disqualified some others because they ride the line of being primaries. I don't know. Some of this might have been totally unfair, but this is my video, so if you think it's unfair, make your own. Anyway, I'm sure this has been plenty long. I can't see how long we've been rolling, but it's been a long time for sure. This has been a fun exercise. Hopefully you enjoyed seeing some of these. If you've got more reasons why you think it's good to carry a secondary knife, comment down below. If you think it's stupid to carry a secondary knife, feel free to rattle off down below as well. I love carrying secondary knives. It's fun for me to double the amount of knives in my pocket. That's really what it comes down to, if I'm being totally honest. So there you have it, my friends. Thanks to everybody who watched all the way through. Thanks to everybody who has subscribed, who has liked, who has bought a t-shirt, who has bought stickers from me. Thank you especially to my Patreon patrons. I just got a new Patreon patron today. Isaac, shout out to you. You are an awesome dude. I sincerely appreciate that contribution. You guys are awesome. I'm having so much fun doing this. Coming right up on 1K subscribers, so big giveaway when that happens. Thank you, everybody. I'll talk to you soon.